I'd like to call this Development and Planning Services Committee meeting of Monday, January the 21st to order. You have an agenda in front of you. Is there any additions to the agenda by staff or council?
None from staff, Your Worship.
Council? Okay, seeing none. Any disclosure of interest, councillors? Okay, I see no disclosure of interest. Thank you. We'll move to presentations. Item 5.1, temporary use permit application TUP-15 amendment. Salmon Folk Music Society, Dude Thompson, 550 10th Avenue Southwest and 690 10th Avenue Southwest, 10th Street, temporary camping for Roots and Blues Festival. Director of Development Services.
Thanks, Your Worship. This application is to amend a temporary use permit application for 3 properties used by the Roots and Blues Salmon Arm Folk Music Society for temporary campgrounds during the Roots and Blues Festival. The TUP, temporary use permit, was approved last spring for a 3-year period for 3 festivals. And the manager for Salmon Arm Folk Music Society, David Ganella, approached me last fall, around October, and he floated the idea of increasing the number of days the campground could be used from 3 days to 7 days, and also expanding the area of the campground. The proposed expanded area is shown on Appendix 1, and it's approximately 3.5 acres, 4 acres in size. Right now, what's approved is on this property, 1300 10th Street Southwest, is this rectangle area here, campground number 3. And the proposal is to expand campground number 3 into this portion of the property. It's a funny shaped property, and this raises the question, why wasn't this area approved in the past? And the temporary use permit applications for the Roots and Blues Festival campground go back to 2005, about 14 years, and they were one of the very first temporary use permits in the city. And I believe the previous owner of this property used this portion of the property for cattle grazing, and the previous owner did not want the campground on that portion of the property. All 3 properties are in the agricultural land reserve, and a campground requires non-farm use approval by the ALC. The ALC has approved this campground for this year, last year, and the year before, 2017, 2018, 2019. After this festival in 2019, the ALC's approval runs out, and when council approved this temporary use permit last spring, you approved it for 3 years. So that would have been 2018, 2019, and 2020. So the Roots and Blues folks will have to reapply to the ALC either before the festival this year or after. It remains to be seen if the ALC will approve that. However, they did approve a similar application on the Peter Page property right to the east for 4 years, and that approval was either last year or the year before, maybe 2017 they approved that, or 2018. But as we know, things have changed at ALC recently, and it's just hard to say if they will approve that or not. But this application is basically to expand the area of Campground 3 and the number of days. And David Ganella has included a proposal. It's in your agenda outlining the rationale for that.
Great, thank you. And morning, David. Nice to see you. Would you like to come forward and just speak to us about your proposal? We do have your letter, thank you very much, but any other additions you want to make, and there may be questions from council.
Yes, well, the expansion would allow the festival to actually rent out 600 spaces. Previously, we were allowed to do 600, but we couldn't physically put all the campers in a safe manner with the right traffic flow through the 3 sites previously. So the expansion of using the rest of that yard, we can actually go and use another 100 sites. It would also allow for each site to have less of a concentration of sites on each one. We could lay them out so there'd be less on each one as well, which we believe is the boarding off the roads would be a lot more efficient, for one. The extension of days would allow the try to lessen the impact of the Thursday load in, because right now currently we have a 4-day camping pass, and they show up on the Thursday. We say get here, be ready at 2 p.m. to load on. They're there at 8 a.m. and they're already wondering why they can't go on. So last year we found some difficulties of having the roads feeling pretty congested. That was the first time in a few years. But also last year was another significant happening was that we sold out almost a month in advance. So we felt like we left possible revenue and also patrons from coming in, because the campgrounds is the base where of a lot of our festival. They go to the hotels, they seek the motels, but they want the experience of walking from the site and having that whole experience of really feeling like you're on the site the whole time. The campgrounds is that opportunity, and it's just gotten popular each year. With also, if we were allowed to expand and also expand the days and location, we're looking at offering different types of camping. A possibility in possibly later in the summer, we're looking at doing some glamping, which is having prearranged tents that are already put in place that would have a plywood sort of on top of crates kind of base. So people are walking on like a wood floor, like a temporary wood floor, and just give them that type of experience, which we're seeing at other festivals. So we're trying to raise our amenities as much as we possibly can.
Great, thank you very much, David. I'll just open it up to questions and see if council has any questions for you. Council, any questions for David this morning? Councillor Lindgren.
Thanks. Hi, Dave.
Hello.
So I haven't stayed in the campground. I have been to Roots and Blues lots of times, but I'm wondering about noise levels in the campgrounds. Has that come up with neighbors or residents across the street?
We've definitely experienced noise issues. There's people who come off the site and they think they want to have a musical jam at 1 a.m. in the morning. We typically have worked with Citizens Patrol and another group, rugby group, who go through the campsites and just try to calm them down. It typically doesn't reach past 1 o'clock. That's typically when we have the issues. If it's later, then we call the RCMP in, but we don't really have many reports of that happening. But we definitely do have people who are just kind of pretty energized from the event, and also specific to the campgrounds. The one at what we call Campground 1, which is next to the private campground that runs during the festival, that one tends to be the quietest, because it's the vendors, the volunteers, and families. They actually have issues with the other side, because the other side doesn't have as much regulations that we already have sort of built in. But from our campsites, I think we have them managed. All it takes is 1 year, 1 Yahoo, but yeah, luckily we've been pretty good about it, so yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Cannon.
Thank you. Not really a question, but just wanted to say I'm the representative on the Roots and Blues Committee, and sitting at the board meeting, it's a well-greased machine. Like, they've thought about how opening this up will help with the congestion on the road and stuff, and it's been very well thought out, so I would urge everyone to support this.
Thank you, Debbie.
Great, thank you, Councillor Cannon. Any other questions for David? David, I know that you've got the okay from the ALC. Can we just go back to that map? So there's not a new ALC application needed for adding that piece, because it's considered to be part of the other piece.
Yes, the extension plus the duration, because consistently with their permit, they are assuming that we could have it up to 2 weeks, which we're not remotely interested in, because we don't have them we're at this stage, we can't pull that off even if we wanted to. So we're looking, at just a 3-day expansion on the time. We also spoke with, just so that, I don't know if we're going to mention this, but I spoke with Scott from the city, and he didn't address anything really. No bells went off when we were talking about this. I think it's just going to be typically having people congregated in the area. It's kind of something they've dealt with before. I don't think from their approach, even also from mine, I don't think this is going to be as popular right off the bat. Like, it's hard to judge, but I don't see everyone doing 7 days, because it's just, it's a financial commitment by your patrons to be able to stay that whole time. So I think it's just going to be few piddly until the Wednesday, Thursday. Wednesday's probably going to be really the day that most people want to come if they can. Mm-hmm. So.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the staff sergeant, we do have his report, and he says the risk to require additional policing is likely moderate to low in my assessment, and this may also resolve a number of community issues by spreading out arrivals of RVs, which is what you've spoken about.
Yeah, it just seems logical. I mean, of course, this is anytime we do something new, especially with the Roots and Blues, we always have that trial year. Just you don't know what's going to happen. Like, that unknown is still, until we do it, we won't. But we feel pretty confident this is a safe approach, and it's going to have some benefits, definitely, from bringing that traffic off 10th and 10th.
Okay. Can I just ask you one more question? And David, I know that on this map, is it lot 460, the one on the right, is not under the jurisdiction of the actual festival. Is that right?
That far? No, it's not. No.
So that's like a private campground.
It is a private campground. I mean, we've spoken with the operators about us managing that property and just paying like how we do the other property owners. We give them a portion of the gross. But at this point, they've not bid on that idea. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Any other questions for David? Thank you for coming this morning. You can have a seat, and there may be.
I was a little bit late dropping off kids at school, so there you go.
No troubles.
Thank you.
There is a proposed motion, Council, for consideration on page 1. If we could put that motion on the screen. Do we have a mover for that motion? Councillor Cannon, second Councillor Flynn. So the motion basically is to amend the temporary use permit to extend the number of days from 4 to 7, and also to extend the area as you had seen on the map. Any discussion or comment? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you, David. We'll move to item number 2. Item number 2 is Cannabis Retail Store Application number CRS-7, BC Cannabis Stores, Her Majesty's Queen, in the right of the Province of British Columbia, Callaway Rate, Salmon Arm, 2991 10th Avenue Southwest, better known as Smart Centers. I'll ask the Director of Development Service to speak to us on this one.
Your Worship, this is the 7th application to City Council for a cannabis retail store. The proposed site is Smart Centers, where Walmart and Dollarama and Winners and Tim Horton and an oil change business and other buildings are developed on the property. The applicant is a liquor distribution branch, and that is a branch of the province of BC. And I've spoken to several people about this proposal over the last 6 months. Cam is here. I think, Cam, you're from either Victoria or Vancouver. Okay, sorry. There's been a number of people in the province that I've been speaking to about several proposals, including this one. Cam and I spoke about this back in September, and she made it clear that she would like to meet the city's policies and our bylaws, and I pointed her to the area, the commercial core area, sorry, not the commercial core, the commercial area west of the commercial core, which is supported in our cannabis retail store policy. And this application is quite different than the other 6 that have gone before you. The main difference is the Liquor Cannabis Regulation Branch does not issue licenses for provincial cannabis retail stores. And there's correspondence in your package confirming that from one branch to the other. As far as the city's zoning bylaw goes, the property has a comprehensive site-specific development zone, and that zone supports shopping centers and retail stores. And the definition of retail store supports and allows the use of a cannabis retail store. The actual location of the proposed store is in a building that has not been constructed yet, just south of Dollarama at the corner of 30th Street and the Trans-Canada Highway. This is known as Building F on the original development permit drawings that were approved by council back around 2011. And Building F is about 15,000 square feet, and the cannabis retail store would take up a small portion, maybe about a quarter of the building. And Cam has put together quite a detailed proposal that's in your package as well, outlining what is proposed for the provincial cannabis retail store. There is one other provincial store I'm aware of in Kamloops, and that may be the only one in the province at this time. If this is approved throughout, then I have some correspondence from the manager of Smart Centers, who says they would like to start constructing Building F in the fall of this year. So a very nice proposal. Talks about the floor plan, the storefront, the signage, the interior. There's a cannabis molecule. I assume that's THC, but I'm not sure. Cam may have some more to say on this.
Great, thank you very much. Welcome to Salmon Arm, Cam. Nice to have you here in town. Would you like to come forward and talk to us about your proposal?
Good morning, Mayor and Council, and thank you for having me here this morning. I'm sorry I was a little late too. I went to the wrong location as well. As Kevin has noted, the BC government is interested in opening up a cannabis retail store here in Salmon Arm, specifically a new development that's at the Smart Centers location, and the store itself will be about 3,000 square feet. And before I get into the store proposal, I'll just give a little bit background about the liquor distribution branch. So currently, we're the wholesaler distributor for liquor across the entire province, and we operate 197 government liquor stores. So we distribute products to all of the private stores in the province as well, and also hospitality customers like restaurants and bars. In December 2017, the government announced that the BCLDB would again be the wholesale distributor for cannabis. So right now there's a centralized warehouse in Richmond, BC, where all of the cannabis product, the legal cannabis product, flows through that specific warehouse and gets shipped to private stores and public stores. So right now we have one public store operating in Kamloops, BC. That was the first store that opened on legalization date, and there's a few, I think about 7 private stores that have been licensed in the province as well. 3 are operating in Vancouver, so all of the product comes packaged into the warehouse and then off to those stores. And from the feedback that we received from the Kamloops store itself, it's going really well. There's not a lot of, we haven't experienced any issues outside of the store. I know smell's a big concern for some people. I've been to the store myself on the store day opening, and there was no issues with smell. It's ventilated relatively well. There's some minor smell that comes in when the product comes in, but it's all locked in a safe behind store staff, and there's limited people have access to that product as well. And as you're probably aware, there's no self-service in any of the stores, unlike liquor. So a store staff person actually has to go back to the back behind them and pick up the package for the customer. So for the Kamloops store, it'll probably all other government stores in the province will be really similar to that. So you'll go in, there will be an ID check at the beginning before you enter the store, because no minors are allowed to come into the store. So you're not even allowed to bring, your children in with you in like a liquor store. And this is because of Bill C-45 regulations that do not allow minors to enter the store. So after the ID check, there's smell jars within the store where customers can go and smell products, and there's a product consultant that will help them figure out what kind of products they're looking for, and then they'll go to the cash register and say, these are the products I'm looking for, and that's when they'll receive the product. And the look and feel of the stores will be pretty similar. There's like a little iPads and like technology throughout the store to go through different product types. And we're also operating the only online cannabis store, which is also called the BC Cannabis Store. And even though we just have one store operating right now in the province, we've received approval for 2 more stores in Kamloops just recently, in Terrace, Powell River. So there's a few different locations where we're hoping to get approval in the next few months as well. And I think we've kind of publicly stated that within the next year and a half, we'll hopefully have about 40 stores operating in the province. And this particular store will be about 3,000 square feet and will employ about at least 6 union staff, likely more depending on how many customers come through too. And that would consist of a store manager and assistant store manager, and the salary range starts around like $20 per hour. I'm trying to think of what else, but there will be security cameras in the store, and we have a corporate loss department that has access to all of this. And in the first week in the Kamloops store, there was a lot of traffic and movement, so we hired a security guard on site for that time. So if that were to happen in any of the other communities that we're going into, we would have security on site as well to manage those issues if there's long lineups. But we don't anticipate, especially with the opening of more private stores, we don't anticipate the long lineups as we had in Kamloops. And yeah, that's kind of about it. That's our proposal, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Great, thank you very much for summarizing that for us. Council, do we have questions for Cam this morning? Okay, I have a couple, unless other councillors have some. The minors not permitted in stores, is that apply to all stores, like private and government-run ones?
So that's actually, it's in the federal legislation that minors, the rule is that minors can't see cannabis product too. So that's why our stores also have a frosted frosted window outside, so minors can't see cannabis product. So it's to kind of get away with that. But in terms of the ID check, like every store should have a mandatory ID check, and no minors. Like we had a customer in Kamloops, for example, that was trying to bring their kid into the store, and like legally we're not allowed to let a child into the store, so private stores would have to follow the same rule.
Okay. Price setting of product, is that determined by the province, or how does that work?
Yes, so it was, actually that was something that I worked on in the last year or so, but it got Treasury Board approval. So the way the price is set up right now, so cannabis licensed producers that are licensed by Health Canada, they give us the supplier price. And unlike liquor, where we don't usually negotiate the supplier price, we tried our best in the BC government to negotiate as low as we could possibly go with those prices. And then in addition to that, the province adds a 15% wholesale markup. And that gives, and then on top of that, the retail stores would add their own markup. And unlike, I guess, so what the province gets back on this is a 15% wholesale markup. And I can just say, like, right now it's not a profit. There's not a lot of profit in the cannabis. Like, the prices are quite high, the supplier prices. And we're hoping as the years go on, they'll get lower and to eliminate the illicit market. But the intent is to keep prices low.
So what I was trying to understand is, that's helpful. Can retailers set their own price in their store?
Yes, they can set their own retail price.
Okay, so they could have a sale on a particular item if they wanted.
They're allowed to have sales, yeah.
Okay, so just like private liquor stores then. Mm-hmm. Okay. The licensing piece, and we did have a letter from the province that said, under the Cannabis Control and Licensing Act, private retail stores may not operate without a license issued by the general manager, but public cannabis stores are authorized under different legislation and do not require a license. LDB should work directly with local governments that are interested in having public cannabis stores in their jurisdiction. So thank you for working with us. Do I understand the legislation that you don't necessarily have to, you could just, the province could just come in and open the store?
So legally, the LDB or the Minister of Attorney General gets his powers through the Cannabis Distribution Act, and he has an administrator, and he's appointed our General Manager, Blaine Lawson, as the administrator of that legislation, and that gives him the power to establish stores across the province. And even for liquor stores, we don't legally have to go in and follow those same processes, but even for like a public perception point of view and for private retailers, we wanted to follow the same rules.
Okay. Councillor Cannon.
Just had a question kind of on the tails of our mayor's questions. So if the distribution center does a 15% markup when they sell it to the private locations, do they have the ability then in their store to sell it below that 15%, or do they put that markup on their product?
So they're allowed to add their own retail margin on top of that, but they are not allowed to sell below the wholesale markup, and that actually isn't governed by our branch. It's governed by the licensing branch in Victoria, the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation branch. So they license all of the private stores, and that's something in their terms and conditions that they can't sell below the wholesale price.
So the BC government a store can't sell below their 15% markup that they mark up the wholesale. So they can't sell it at wholesale. They sell it the 15% markup that they sell to the private.
Yes. So the public stores will also have a retail margin on top of the wholesale markup, and we can't sell it at the wholesale price.
Okay. That's my question. Great, thank you.
Thank you. And the product to be sold presently doesn't include edibles or anything like that. It's just dried tobacco, right?
So the proposed regulations for edibles and concentrates, there was recent draft legislation or proposal that the federal government has released. So we're just commenting on that, and I think they hope to have the edibles legalized October of this year as well.
Okay.
So that'll come into the mix later.
All right. Councillor Wallace-Richmond.
Thanks, Your Worship, and thank you for being here. Welcome to Salmon Arm. Can you talk to me a bit about, through Your Worship, about the catchment area for this store? I would imagine there'll also be a similar proposal in Vernon and possibly Revelstoke, just to kind of get a sense of who you think this market will serve, given the landscape that currently exists, 4 stores in the downtown, 1 store in Canoe, and possibly another store on First Nations.
So we are thinking of 1 store, and unfortunately I can't speak to whether we are submitting applications outside of those places until we submit an application. And I had spoke to Kevin about different locations, and I understand you had 4 applications in the downtown core. That's why we were looking at this specific site, because it's a little bit further away, because obviously you don't want to go into an oversaturated market as well. And we did have a desire to look at a store at Salmon Arm because we were directed, to go into the province and to several different communities, Salmon Arm being one of them. And we hope to, bring in customers outside of this area as well. But at this point, I'm sorry, I can't speak to whether we'll have stores or.
No, that's fair. It's just, it's, the competitive nature of the market. If you're big and you're only in Salmon Arm, you will draw from Revelstoke and Chase and Enderby, but if you're going to have a store in Enderby and Armstrong and Blind Bay and that sort of, it's more about without damaging the private landscape that's happening now, right?
Yeah, well, we have we do have a population target too. So we've our executive director of cannabis operations has publicly stated at GCCR that we likely are not going to pursue a community with a population of less than $10,000, and it has to do with a lot of the financial capital related to investing in a store too. It's significantly higher for government stores because even the procurement of our products, we have to go through like a formal process through BC bid, and if you think about labor and all of those kinds of things, it's quite costly, and we don't want to have a financial burden on the province as well.
All right, thanks. That's very helpful.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Cannon.
One last question. So is the development of that area in the fall, does that work within your timelines for this store?
It does. We negotiated kind of that lease with the understanding that it would take a little bit longer to develop, and even for us, like the store opening process is it's quite lengthy for us. So it's about a 30-week process for us to even get a store up and running because of labor we have to hire too. It has to go through the public service, and as you probably know, things are a little bit slower in the government process. So it's kind of lengthy, and we have to go through BC bid to get all of our procurement for all of the inventory in the store too. So it does work for our timelines.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Great, thank you, Cam. I don't know if you can answer this question for me. It's not particular about your application, but as you know, we've had 4 applications we've okayed in the downtown and 1 in Canoe, and so we've okayed them. We've sent it back to the province. What's the do you have any idea what the turnaround time is for those retail stores?
I probably shouldn't be speaking on behalf of that branch, but I wouldn't have a date. But I know they're working as hard as they can. There's a lot of pressure on that side of the
In
government.
other
right now, too.
communities, how long has it taken, do you know, between when it's been sent by local government and turned around back to the retail store?
I can't say. Yeah, I don't work in that area of the government, and I probably shouldn't speak to that.
Sure, fair enough. And, I guess from our point of view, the quicker the better, because those retail stores are leasing space and of course are not selling presently.
No, and understandable too, right? Like that's a tricky situation for all of us too, is like waiting for the municipal approval, and then have this like lease in place too, and you're paying rent. It's not really, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions that council might have? Okay, well, thank you very much for coming and visiting us.
Yeah, thank you
We
very
may
much
have
for
questions
having me.
later.
Thank you.
So council, there is a proposed motion. I wonder if we could get that on the screen. The staff recommendation is there. Is there someone who would like to move that motion? Councillor Lindgren, is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Wallace-Richmond. Discussion on the motion. Councillor Wallace-Richmond.
Just for the sake of discussion, I'm happy to support this application and appreciative of the steps that this provincial branch has taken in being mindful of the approach that we've taken in Salmon Arm.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. So the public hearing on that will be January the 28th. We'll move to item number 3, Director of Engineering and Public Works, Trans-Canada Highway Corridor Safety Improvements Implementation. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'll give a little bit of a timeline here. Back in early 2008, 2009, there was discussion about corridor safety along the Trans-Canada Highway. There was discussions with the Ministry of Justice at that time of installations of red light cameras to try and basically alleviate any speeding vehicles through the red lights in the downtown core. This was addressed by, at the time, Michael DeYoung, who was the Attorney General, and at that time it was basically said that they would work with the RCMP to try and enforce. The discussions with the ministry continued. And at that time, Clayton Pecknold, who was the Assistant Deputy Minister, indicated to the city that red light cameras were not warranted at this location, and that they were recommending that we partner with ICBC on a traffic corridor safety study. So the city engaged with ICBC in 2013 on a traffic safety study, and that was done through the entire corridor, essentially coming down Tank Hill at 6th all the way to Shuswap Street, and they looked at all the intersections and the surrounding area and how that impacts the Trans-Canada Highway. And of course, we have a vibrant downtown, which needs the Trans-Canada Highway for access egress, so that was also considered. A report was brought to council after that report was completed, and council indicated that they wanted a working group established to discuss and review all of the recommendations in that report. So that was done in 2013, and later that year in October, a report was brought back to council with a quick win solution. So at that time, the recommendations were obviously to move the signals, space out the signals, the traffic signals, but there was a lot of discussion about, you know, what can we do in the interim without impacting or moving the lights at that time. So there was a few improvements made at that point. A report was brought to council again in regards to doing a traffic study downtown to see how any of these improvements would affect the downtown core. Council wasn't in favor of moving forward with that, and essentially it sat on the shelf for a few years until 2016, when there was another fairly major accident on the Trans-Canada corridor, and at that time staff were directed to reopen the discussions with the ministry about the traffic safety corridor report, and it was decided that possible phasing of the improvements would happen. And so the phasing of the improvements, just for council's, I'll see if I can bring it up here, but I'll bring up the map afterwards, sorry. The phasing was basically a way of looking at it in two sections. And the first section was basically to improve 6th to Shuswap Street. And that meant moving the lights from Ross Street to 4th and giving it more of a gap and spreading that spacing out. There was also an open house on May 25th, 2017, and we received input from the businesses. We had input from the Trucking Association. It was thorough and extensive, and a report was then brought back to council. And at that time, council directed staff to work with the ministry to form an agreement to move forward with phase 1. And that was in 2017. In 2018, we did receive the agreement, and at that time, council deferred it until after the election. And so now we are here with this report. And essentially, what I'd like to do this morning, I'm sorry I took so long with that timeline, but it's very important. This has been on the table for a long time. So my report is fairly detailed. It covers a lot of the things that I've just mentioned. The importance of this is the safety in the corridor. The second point of this is access egress into the downtown core. And from the report and from staff's perspective, the improvements that are being proposed in the corridor would do both. And I'll explain that a little further down in my report. Essentially, we had some discussions with the ministry just after the election, and it was decided that it's an important project for the ministry to improve safety along this corridor. And it was decided that instead of doing a phase project, it would be better to do the entire project altogether. And what ends up happening, in short, is right now at Shuswap Street is the only intersection that we have an advanced left turn. We don't have an advanced left turn out of the downtown core, only into the downtown core off the Trans-Canada Highway. With these improvements that are being proposed, there would be two signalized intersections, one at Shuswap and one at 4th, that would have advanced left signals in and out of the down core. So that would improve the access egress. And I'll show some maps a little later on. The ministry has indicated by doing the project in its entirety, it would obviously save in the economics and the scale of the project. Doing it all at once would minimize the impact on the downtown, having it phased and doing it at a later date. And the concentration of the construction would be short-term, essentially doing it all at once. And The project scope, obviously there's going to be an increase in funding required, but that has been included in this year's budget. And so in my report, I discussed phase one being 330,000, and the city's component, it was essentially, at the beginning of this discussion, it was a one-third, one-third, one-third discussion. The ministry at that point with phase one said that they would pick up, because this report was done in 2013, the costs have obviously escalated since then, and the ministry has picked up the additional costs. So ICBC has picked up some traffic safety improvements, and through that they would fund a portion of the project. The city came up with their share, and the ministry would pick up the rest. For phase two, it's estimated that that cost would be $220,000. A lot of it is essentially changes to the islands and the medians in the highway. The biggest cost is the traffic signal controller at Shoeshop Street. And when we met with the ministry in late November, they indicated that they would like the city to partner with that as well. So we put $30,000 in the budget to help partner with that new controller at that intersection. So everything is in the budget for this, and essentially the ministry would like to see this go forward. And from staff's perspective, it is the same. Now I'll bring up a couple of maps here. The one I have on the screen right now shows the areas of development for the city, and you'll see we have a fairly large subdivision area, new subdivision, just up Okanagan, and the flow from this to get to downtown is down Okanagan Avenue, and essentially they've got two options to go through, and right now the flow is going down to Alexander. If the lights were to move 4th, obviously they'd be turning at 6th, go down to 4th, and across the highway. We also have a fairly large development area in the Hillcrest area that's new. And that flow of traffic is either down Otter Road or 10th, coming down 5th, and then again splitting that traffic down those two roads. Not very much traffic goes to Ross Street right now, not coming down Okanagan. They don't make that additional turn to go down Ross, and I'll show that in another map. The other area of development is Area B, and we're seeing the first phase of the Area B development is the Conachuck subdivision, which is just at the end of Shoeshop Street. And essentially this area is going to have a huge impact as it grows in the future. And the majority of that traffic is going to go down Shoeshop Street and then into the downtown core. Now, this is the existing traffic flow. And you'll see by the traffic arrows, the majority of the traffic coming in and out of the downtown core is through Alexander. And essentially it's a small looped area. Our downtown core is quite compressed, and I think everyone that drives down there knows that if you're trying to find a parking spot or you're trying to get to a store, you're going to make some turns. You're going to go down a few streets in order for you to get to parking areas, Ross Street, Inner Core, Hudson. Right now, the access egress is this intersection. The majority of the traffic coming out of the downtown is using Ross Street to do that left turn onto the Trans-Canada Highway or the right turn. So we're focusing on Shoeshop, Alexander, and Ross. As we all know, the Tim Hortons intersection at 4th, essentially you're only using that to egress west on Trans-Canada Highway. It's very difficult to cross the highway and go eastbound. And that happens the same at 6th. During midday when the traffic is light, usually you can get across, but any kind of peak hours, you're not getting across those intersections, and they are fairly unsafe. With the proposed improvements, we're spacing out the intersection, and this is the whole issue, is these two lights, the light at Ross and Alexander, are too close together. And that is pointed out in the traffic study, in the safety study. Essentially, by spacing those lights out, you have a better safety factor on the highway. You would get full movements at Shoeshop Street. This would turn in, the McLeod intersection would turn into a right in, right out. Alexander would remain the same. Ross Street would be median, so you'd have right in, right out both sides. There would be mountable curb, so for fire access egress, the fire trucks could go across the median. And in discussions with Chief Shirley, he indicated that it's not a big issue for them. They could actually go around and go to the lights, because when they have their sirens on, everybody's supposed to stop anyway. So they have multiple ways of getting across or navigating the Trans-Canada Highway. But having the mountable curb at Ross would give them some benefit. Moving on to 4th, this would become a fully mobile intersection. Access egress, advanced lefts. We have the future 4th Street Parkade here. So now you're funneling traffic down 4th to the Parkade. Again, our downtown core is very condensed, but looking at these two maps, you'll see that the circulation in downtown almost improves by having the lights spaced out this way. You go back to this, you'll see that right now the circulation is in this area primarily. By moving the lights, you're now getting more circulation around a larger component of the downtown. With the Ross Street underpass, which we haven't shown on here, the Ross Street underpass will be located right in this location. I don't think that this was going to change the flows in downtown. Currently, anyone going to the north side of the tracks is either going to Marine Park, which again, coming in from any of these directions, you've got to turn a few corners in order to get Marine Park. Or they're going across Narcisse, which is on the far west side. Having the flows come in at those 3 intersections will actually improve the downtown flow and getting to the Ross Street underpass. This will be a 4-way stop when the underpass is completed, and at some point it will be ducted so that in the future signalization could be installed if required. But essentially, from staff's perspective, I know we've talked lots about this project. Staff feel that this is a project that needs to happen in order to improve safety along the corridor. And that concludes my discussion, if you have any questions.
Great, thank you very much, Rob. And I know that we have some guests in the audience as well. And I think these gentlemen are from MOTI, is that right?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, so you're available for questions if we might have them?
You bet, yeah.
Did you want to say anything beforehand?
Not too much, and keep it fairly brief. Other than
Okay,
the
well,
fact
welcome.
that- yeah.
Thanks
so,
for coming this morning.
Yeah, so I'm Steve Surratt. I'm the district manager for the Okanagan Shoe Shop District. I've been working with Rob on this for a few years. I attended the open house in 2017, so I certainly heard and spoke to a lot of the feedback we got, and also Ryan Thorpe, who's our district engineer with the Okanagan, who's been working with Rob on this latest round. So not much else to add, but besides what Rob put, as there's definitely a need here, and this is something that we do want to move forward with. As you all are aware, we were prepared last spring to move forward with this, and we do feel it's an important improvement along this corridor, especially with the accidents we've seen at those 2 signalized intersections, and getting that spacing in there appropriately, and the improvements that come along with it, I think are going to be a huge benefit for not just the corridor, but for how people access your downtown. So. But yeah, we're here to answer any questions you might
Okay,
have.
thank you, Steve. Maybe just have a seat and we'll just see if there's some questions for you or Ryan. And I'll open up the questions from council. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Worship. And with this map that's up, it looks like you're saying that at Alexander and the Trans-Canada, you're not going to be able to turn right. Is there a reason there's no right turn arrow there?
No, you'll be able to turn right. That's just showing that it stays the same. There's no change at Alexander.
Okay, because the previous map of the current situation said you could turn right there. It had an
You'll still
arrow.
be able to turn right at
Okay.
Alexander.
My question, couple of questions, is there any or has there been any discussion with an additional left turn lane at Alexander to go into town from the west? A left turn signal. I mean, I know you're going to be able to turn left, I think, but an advanced left turn signal?
No, there will be no advanced left at Alexander. It'll remain the same. The only improvements will be at Shuswap and at 4th.
Okay, so Shuswap, and I just want to make it really clear that I probably cross this highway 6 to 8 times a day. I come right down Okanagan. I go through usually the playground zone, but I would much prefer to turn right before the playground zone and use 4th. I think we have to move forward with this, and I do feel that I also use Shuswap every day coming out of town in our massive rush hour at around 5 o'clock, 4:30. And my one concern is that there isn't left turn getting out of town signal. And I think that will also be a significant safety improvement, because I have seen an awful lot of very close calls with people not understanding what they're supposed to do at that intersection coming down Shuswap. Is there enough queuing though? Because lately I've had a hard time getting off of Ross Street onto Shuswap because of cars backed up at that light. Will a left turn to get out of town improve that?
Your Worship, the queuing on the highway will improve because they'll be extended with the medians.
Mm-hmm.
The queuing on Ross, we have a short distance there. There's nothing that we can do to improve. So essentially here and here are short blocks.
Yeah.
We can't improve the queuing. One thing I will mention about Shuswap Street is there's potential conflicts with pedestrians crossing. And with the advanced lefts, that'll improve that safety factor as well.
There is, yeah.
So unfortunately in our downtown core, because of the short blocks, we can't improve the queuing for the turns. But there will be additional queue lines along these new medians that are being proposed.
And you mentioned in your opening remarks that number 1 is improve the safety of the corridor, and number 2 is improve access and egress into the downtown with the advanced turn signals. There's arguments by people, stakeholders, that say that none of this matters. It's all about getting traffic faster through town. So I would ask the ministry people, there's people that are questioning whether you guys are just trying to move people through town faster or truly trying to improve the traffic. Could you address that for me?
Our goal is always safety first. So mobility, but they kind of go hand in hand a little bit, right? That you improve mobility, improve access, and safety comes along with that. So yes, we have a mandate for the highway and the highway corridor, but this is something we've been working very closely with Salmon, Arm, and Rob and Carl to make sure that we're not just doing improvements here that solely benefit the highway and safety on the highway, that it is something that benefits both parties, because we recognize that the highway is also a function of your community's network, and it has to work for both of us. So we believe, and the report sort of concludes that this provides benefit for both and is a good improvement both ways. So not just solely to the benefit of them.
And just so I'm clear, the increased costs and the recommendation to do the whole project, Director of Engineering and Public Works, the increases in cost are being picked up more by the ministry than by us?
That's correct, Your Worship. The city has agreed that to fund $30,000 towards the new traffic control signal at Shuswap Street. Okay. And the actual cost is approximately $220,000. And I haven't confirmed those. The ministry was still doing the design, working on the design.
And that's to add the left turn signals off of Shuswap,
as well as the median improvements in front of McLeod.
Okay.
So essentially that would be phase 2 of the improvements. So from Alexander Street up to Shuswap, all of those improvements.
Okay, thank you. I'll make comments later.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Councillor Cannon.
Thank you. So the the Shuswap and the 4th have the advance left, correct?
That's correct.
Those intersections. And what would be the possible timelines for this project? Like what would be a start date and how long would a project like this take?
I'll have to defer that to the ministry. Our discussions were that they would like to proceed with this this summer if they get approval in their budget as well.
Okay, Ryan, did you want to come forward? Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. So, obviously, dependent on working together and approval, from Salmon. This does need to be something that everybody is happy with this solution. But ideally, we'd actually be delivering this summer. So, in terms of timeline, that does mean that we would need to go to the tendering process pretty early in the spring here in order to get that completed. And then obviously being cognizant of the summer busy time, so avoiding that. So depending on how early we can get it tendered, this could be something that's done either before summer holidays begin, or it would be a fall delivery after Labor Day sort of thing to avoid those busy times.
Yeah, I would suggest that we would not undertake this project in the summer when we have busy traffic holiday.
Yeah, we would also impose work restrictions as well too, so it avoids busy time, and that would be regardless of what time of the year that happens, so that to obviously minimize the impact during the construction. It's not actually that significant of a project, so in terms of how long it would take to complete, we're probably looking at a couple of weeks for the delivery of the actual project.
Oh, really?
where works are being done. It's not it's not going to be months of active construction.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. Okay, thank you. Do we have in our budget, I guess depending on if the ministry can get the funding that they need to do this project with us, to do both phase 1 and 2?
Yes,
Director of Engineering?
Your Worship, we have all of the funding in place. We would have to confirm that ICBC's funding is still there, but in discussion with David Dean from ICBC, he's indicated that they're still supportive of the project. So currently the city has their funds in place.
Okay, and I just wanted to comment on looking at the map with 4th, the intersection there, and when you do look at the flow, it does lessen the tightness of the flow when you look at that map, so I would tend to agree with that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And we'll continue with questions councillors have, and then after that, I'll ask for a motion if anyone would like to make one, and then we can express our opinions. Councillor Lindgren.
Thank you. I understand that the issue has been around, the big issue that people are talking about is about semi-trucks running red lights on the highway and colliding with cars either at that light or coming from the side street at that light. So I'm just wondering if advanced greens help to deal with that problem, and if so, could somebody explain the mechanics of why that helps?
Okay, good question. We'll ask maybe Steve or Ryan if they can address that question from Councillor Lindgren.
Yeah, so with regards to the trucks, and the biggest factor is actually how close the lights currently are. And so what tends to happen is drivers can get confused as to one light may have changed while the other one is, one may be green while one's red. And when they're as close as they currently are, that's really the biggest contributing factor, as opposed to whether or not those lefts are there. There's certainly an added benefit to fewer nodes along this section of highway because it allows larger storage capacity for the vehicles that are trying to access that downtown area. But in terms of the safety with trucks in particular, I know it's been highlighted here, it really is about how close the current configuration between those two lights are, and that's really the driving factor for these, spacing these out to be more consistent with current guidelines for highway construction.
Go ahead, Councillor Lindgren.
So is there any risk of moving their lights further apart, increasing the number of semis running that center actually any of the lights. I envision semi-trucks have a hard time getting going. They have to shift through a lot of gears. So they, once they get up to some sort of speed, they don't want to slow down for the next light. Moving the lights further apart means that they get going faster and makes them less likely to stop at the next light. Is that a risk?
I'd say, I mean, that really, if that is a risk, it's going to come down to an individual driver not following the rules of the road. Again, moving to what this current configuration is in line with current guidelines for highway construction.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Wallace Richmond.
Thanks, Your Worship. Appreciate the report from staff and Modi taking the time to come and talk to us about this. I am not a traffic engineer. I'm grateful to Councillor Lavery for reminding me of that we first started talking about this in 2015. So I have no questions about the calls that staff and Modi has made. I think this is a very specialized field, and I think as a community we have to, if we're asking for changes, we also have to be willing to be thoughtful and respect what the experts have said. Having said that, the one comment I have heard on occasion since the proposal of moving the turn to 4th is, can semis stop in time at the Tim Hortons heading west? I would imagine they could, otherwise you wouldn't have proposed it, but it is the one question I've heard. And if I could be equipped to address that question, I'm good to go.
Okay, thank you. Either
Your
Ryan.
Worship, I can actually answer that.
Okay.
So during our open houses and our working group, we have had support from the BC Trucking Association in support of this project and in support of the spacing of the lights. So we've had many discussions with BC Trucking Association on this, in clarifying what's happening and how it's going to be about, and we received a letter from them in support. So again, back to Ryan's comment about the individual truckers, we have seen in winter times where the trucks have been lined up along there, it's because either the trucks don't have proper tires or they haven't chained up, and etc. So it's about the drivers of the trucks as well. No different than vehicle drivers.
Okay, Councillor Wallace Richmond.
Just to build on that a little bit, because that is something we heard a lot of at the open house, and I think it's the downhill piece that have people sort of anxious. We install advanced warning flashers at the appropriate distance, and we take into account all types of traffic that might be seeing that. So certainly semis, and they're provided far enough back so that they'll have enough time to see it and stop. Again, it comes down to individual drivers driving appropriately.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you. My question was actually going back to this map. I think it was just answered. So if this intersection at 4th, which is the most dangerous intersection in our community, gets fixed, when that light on the highway is changing to red, where will the advanced flashing be? Because I didn't know there was going to be one, but I was hoping there was.
Your Worship, there's currently advanced flashing light. I'll just try and get the...
Yeah, but because of where the stop sign or the light is now, it's not in a great spot, so.
I'll just go to here. So So currently, for the Ross Street intersection, the advanced signal is here. So about a half a block away from the intersection. And this is, you've seen it coming down the hill. Its flashing light indicates when these lights are going to change. If the traffic signalization is moved to 4th, these lights will be moved to this location. So coming down Tank Hill, clear visibility to these lights, indicating that these lights are turning red. So there'll be ample warding. Now part of this, and I've got it in my report, but I didn't speak to it, but we have been in many discussions with ministry we've received verbal agreement in allowing a gateway signage and even speed reader boards coming down Tank Hill. And that's to be determined where those locations would be in the future. And obviously the gateway signage would need more consultation with possibly downtown Salmon Arm and council about what they would like to see. The speed reader boards are traditionally not allowed, if I can say that, on the Trans-Canada Highway, but the ministry has essentially said that they would allow them. Obviously, those would be all the city's cost if we decided to work with the ministry on the placement of those. But that would give some more advanced warning that they're coming into the downtown core. So that's another phase of this project. But that would be, all those costs would be entirely on the cities.
So are you foreseeing signage like you see in a lot of communities that says city center, next 4 exits, something like that?
Something like that, or even just a specific gateway to downtown saying, you know, you're now entering downtown Salmon Arm. Something that distinguishes that even though you're driving through town, you're still on the Trans-Canada Highway. This would basically give an offset to say that you're coming into the downtown area. And there's a possibility, obviously, the primary area would be east of the downtown, east of 6th. But back to your question, definitely the advanced warning signals would be installed or moved.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Lavery.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Harrison. I've got more comments rather than questions, so I'm not sure if it's appropriate at this time to jump into that. Maybe others
Can
have
we
questions.
put you on the top of the comment section?
Without a doubt.
Okay, I have a couple of questions yet. I'm not sure if others have. I'll give others an opportunity to ask any questions they might have before I ask mine. Is there any other questions from council? Okay, could we just go to Appendix C? So on Ross Street, is there right outs?
Your Worship, both the north and south entrance of Ross onto the TCH would have right-in, right-outs. And that's designated by these little pork chop islands.
Okay, that's what those mean.
Yeah.
And so that would be the same at McLeod and the same at Okanagan then?
That's correct.
Okay. I have a couple of questions for Steve or Ryan. I'm not sure who might ask them. So part of the report says during discussions with Modi indicated they would prefer to complete the improvements in cooperation with the city. However, they were clear that even without city support, they would be compelled to complete safety improvements through the corridor at some point in the near future. So what I read that as saying is you're asking for cooperation, but if we're not able to come to conclusion, the project would happen anyway. Do I have that right?
Potentially, yes. I mean, ultimately, our goal is to always work with the communities. We appreciate whatever changes we do here has an impact on how you access your community and your downtown core. So whenever we come through these projects and through communities, our goal is always to work together and figure out solutions that work for both. But certainly myself as district manager and responsible for all of the roads within the Okanagan-Shuswap, I do have an obligation to safety. So if we continue to see safety concerns along this corridor, at some point I have an obligation to make a decision to improve that safety if I have the means to do it. And that includes, having available funding and projects. So is it a lot more challenging if without community support? Yes. And will it be a lot harder to do? Yes. So our preference is always to get that goal and work together and partner where possible. But if safety continues to degrade or become that concern, then we do have to, at some point, make a decision to improve that safety.
I appreciate that answer, and of course, we would want a cooperative project too, but I like having everything like right out there. Yeah. So the answer is that if we're not able to come to agreement, that at some time highways would probably just do the project.
Well, potentially, I would say.
Okay. The director asked about that we have verbal agreement regarding speed reader boards and gateway signage. Is that the way you understand it?
Yeah, absolutely. We've worked with lots of communities on the gateway signage specifically and providing that for it. It's under permit to municipalities. We do it, and if it's for the municipality, what we don't do is for like private businesses and those types of things. We have certain guide signs that we and a policy that we find to provide that. But gateway signage for communities, because it helps with awareness. It really does help as you come in to recognize that you're coming from a little bit less rural environment to more of an urban one. So there's a lot of benefit to that. The speed reader boards is something we've talked about briefly as well. They have benefit as well, but I find they have to be strategically used or turned on because they can collect data for you. But in some cases, drivers can also become complacent to them if they're on too much and there isn't sort of associated enforcement with them. But they can be a very effective tool at certain periods of time, for sure.
Okay. Would the highways consider giving a written agreement that gateway signage and speed reader boards, if the city were to finance them, would be okay with Modi?
We can certainly work with Carl and Rob on that, absolutely.
Okay. I just want to talk to you a bit about gateway signage. Like what I see as a gateway sign is I see a sign that goes over the highway, like it's 40 feet high and it's like you drive through it. Is that what you see as a gateway sign?
I've certainly seen gateway signs like that. I mean, it comes up to it comes down to what the community wants, and like, you know, we're gonna look at various different things. Like obviously, the ownership and maintenance and responsibility for that structure would become the city's, and all the costs with that, including the installation. We would want to make sure safety and our ability to maintain our highways weren't compromised. And as with any permitted structure on our highways, if there comes a time where we need that land or need that area to do improvements, then it would have to be relocated at the city's sort of own expense. That's sort of the risk that comes along with this. In this case, the highway's 4-laned and developed. I don't imagine we're going to be doing much in the future that changes that, but we've worked with communities like that, so that would come with more challenges than just a roadside sign, but certainly something we can work through. Yeah.
I really appreciate that. I cannot think of a better calming measure than an overhead gateway sign on both the east and west side of Salmon Arm. So that's certainly something that I may be just speaking for myself, but something that I'm supportive of. I would like to see a red light camera at Alexander and Trans-Canada Highway. Is that something that's possible?
As we saw in the report, and Rob sort of mentioned, the conditions for it don't really warrant the red light camera, and and I believe the report actually speaks to it. In some cases, it actually can lead to other issues that you're not really expecting, like people trying to stop quicker than maybe perhaps they should because of that fear that the red light camera is in there. So it's not something we sort of are actively doing, but I believe it's ICBC as well who are looking at that a little bit closer. So.
No, I understand that. Can I debate you a little bit?
Sure.
I don't pretend to be a traffic expert either. But I just want to talk a little bit about the history of why we're here today. And this is meant to be a conversation. So the director did refer to a letter October 29th, 2010. And I know it wasn't to Modi because the Attorney General at the time, Michael de Jong, wrote this letter to City Council in 2010. And the reason he wrote the letter was starting 11 years ago, we started on this project. And at that time, what we were looking for was a red light camera because we wanted to slow traffic down. And that may have been a rookie kind of move to start things. So what Mr. de Jong said was, thank you for the informative meeting at the UBCM in Whistler. I'm following to follow up on your discussion regarding intersection safety cameras and your concerns about rural policing in Salmon Arm. I also appreciate hearing about your efforts regarding road safety, and therefore we commit to you that we will enter into an agreement that we will share the cost of installing an intersection safety camera. I've asked for such and such to meet with you and talk to you about cost sharing. So we're right. Yahoo! 3 years, they're going to put a red light camera in. So I know this is not news to you, but I think it's important for everybody on council to understand it. And it's not news to everybody on council either. Some are quite aware. So that was 29th of October. So then in March 26th, 2012, nothing had happened. So I made a motion at council, and Councillor Cannon had seconded it, which said the City of Salmon Arm has received approval in principle for an intersection camera at Trans-Canada Highway in Alexander Northeast from the Ministry of Public Safety and Solicitor General. And whereas an alternate truck speed for trucks traveling downhill Tank Hill into Salmon Arm of 30 kilometers per hour has been advocated by Staff Sergeant Keane. Therefore, let it be resolved that council write a letter to the minister, basically reminding him that they were going to share in the side of the cameras. So, nothing happened. So, on August 13th, 2012, we received a letter to Mayor Cooper from Clayton Pecknold, who was Assistant Deputy Minister, and we met with Clayton a number of times. And he thanked us for the letter regarding a request to cost share the installation of an intersection safety camera. Apologized for the delay in response. Then he said there's a number of steps, including analysis of historical collision data that are requested of staff and partners in order to gain a better understanding of this issue in advance. The long and short of it was, you need to do a study before we can put the intersection camera in to find out whether the intersection camera would help solve the problem that you think it will solve. And so we agreed that we would do that because it seemed like we couldn't get an intersection camera without doing it. So we did the study, and as you had said, what the report said was the lights at Ross and Alexander are too close together. And if you put an intersection camera at Alexander, vehicles going through Alexander will brake quickly and will be rear-ended by the vehicles that are trying to go through the light at Hudson Street. So one of the solutions to that was to move the light to 4th. So now we're talking about moving the light to 4th. Hence, I come back to the intersection camera at Alexander, because it seems to me that now there's a nice, if council wants to do this, there's a nice gap between Alexander and 4th, and that an intersection camera might work nicely for all of us, because of course we are trying to have traffic travel as safely through the corridor as possible. We also want to look out for our pedestrians who are crossing the road at Alexander. And my belief is that right now when you cross a pedestrian crossing at Alexander, when the light turns green for you to walk, everybody in Salmon Arm knows don't walk. Look first, then walk. But I think if there's an intersection camera there and word gets out, I think the trucks are going to stop. Because they know if they don't, they're going to get a ticket. So that's my spiel about it. And I'd love to hear the other side of that argument.
So our expectation is that by relocating the signals the way we have it now, like the true issue was how close those signals were together. And that was what was leading to the larger trucks, especially running those red lights that Ryan mentioned earlier about the proximity and some confusion and in some cases just inability to stop because of how close they are together. The expectation is with this improvement that goes away, that will eliminate trucks being confused on what signal is there, and they'll have more than enough time to stop, and the challenges that you were seeing before that perhaps an intersection safety camera would have fixed will be resolved through this. On the pedestrian side of things, we've appreciated those challenges. We've actually instituted some different signal timings there where the light stays red, all 4 lights stay red a little bit longer when they're switching before the pedestrians go over, just for that little bit of time. But every pedestrian absolutely should look before stepping out into that thing to make sure vehicles are stopping regardless of where they are. That's a fundamental requirement in my belief. Don't assume, make eye contact or stopping. With these improvements and our expectations on how it's going to improve the corridor safety, we don't just do the improvements and say job done and pat ourselves in the back and move on. We continue to review them and analyze them and make sure they're functioning as we did, so as we assumed they were going to based on our engineering. So what I would say to sort of possible future intersection red light cameras, and the agency that's do it. If we do those and we continue to see some of those challenges that that type of a treatment might benefit, it's something we could absolutely consider in the future. But I would want to complete these and monitor how it operates like we do on all of our highways to see how it's functioning. Because like I said, our expectation is these improvements will resolve that challenge of those trucks running the light at Alexander, and and that type of camera won't be required because they aren't necessarily as foolproof as.
Okay. No, I appreciate that comment. I have to tell you that I'm very skeptical because we've been working on this for 13 years, and while I totally understand what you're saying, I'm not optimistic that if we go through with this process, that a red light intersection camera may in the future go in an Alexander. And the reason I'm not optimistic is because we've been working on it for 15 years and it's not there yet. So, do intersection safety cameras not slow down traffic?
You know, I wouldn't want to speak to them too broadly. Like, I don't have a ton of experience. We have some in Kelowna, but I don't have the engineering behind it to speak to it really thoroughly and thoughtfully. So what I would say is we can follow up with some of that reviews. But like I said, in this case, the study concluded that intersection camera wasn't going to resolve the problem. The issue was the proximity, and the improvements we have planned will resolve that issue that we were seeing with trucks running the light at Alexander.
Okay, fair enough, Scott. I appreciate that. The reason I ask that question is I know they slow me down when I'm driving. So, okay, Councillor Lindgren.
Thank you. I have two questions. One is about whether or not physical things like rumble strips help raise awareness that there's a light coming up, and if so, is that a possibility that we could install those, particularly coming down Tank Hill, so that at 4th, traveling west. Sorry, I know you're thinking in different landmarks than I am. So that's my first question. And the second is that if we're going to now restrict straight across access to a limited number of spots here, we're taking away at least 2 throughways, can we consider the idea of changing the length of the green light going across the Trans-Canada? Because currently it's incredibly short. As a matter of fact, to cross at Shuswap Street, to cross over there in the late evening on the way to the movie theater, if you don't press the walk button, you can only get halfway. And now you're being run over by a semi-truck, which nearly happened to me last fall. I didn't realize that you have to push the walk button in order to get a longer green. And so I ended up out there at the same time as a semi was racing through because he saw from a distance the light turning red or turning green for him, and I nearly got run over. So if people are going to be expected to wait at those intersections now because there's very few places to actually cross, I think that we need to give them a longer access to cross there so that they know that, it's several minutes of waiting for the highway traffic to cross currently, and about 15 seconds for the cross traffic. That's all they get. So we're going to have people lined up and impatient and trying to find other ways to get there if we don't do something else.
Okay, so 2 questions then, Councillor Lindgren. One was about the rumble strips. Maybe we'll give Scott a chance, or the director. Do you put those on highways?
No. Yeah, they lead to maintenance challenges, and the pavement can deteriorate a little bit quicker. So certainly not like the transverse ones that would create that kind of awareness. We rely on the advanced warning flashers for situations like that, and signage to alert drivers. It would lead to some potential challenges. And then
every consideration given to longer greens going cross traffic. I think that was your other question.
So the signal timing, we're looking at that all the time. Obviously, we're looking at where the majority of the traffic is traveling. That gets the greater green time. But the signals are set up for the type of user that's going to be using it. So if a pedestrian, if it's just a car, then they utilize the engineering to understand how long that car is going to require to get through the intersection, how many cars we're trying to get through the intersection at that time. But for pedestrians, as you've learned, take quite a bit longer to get across. So it really is important that button's pushed because the pedestrians are significantly slower. So that that triggers that extended green time to allow the pedestrians to safely cross the road. And it's something we continue to look at. Like I said, once the improvements are done, we don't just walk away from it. We continue to monitor it. We continue to work with your team here. And if there's an identification of challenges along the side streets and either increased delays or longer queues and something, then we can certainly look at the signal timing and how it's coordinated to improve the situation if possible. We've got to be cautious. I mean, as you all live in the summer, can get very busy along here, and the more time you provide to side streets, the less time there is in the highway, and it could just lead to more congestion and more safety issues. So it's a balance, but something we definitely work with communities on.
15 seconds seems absurdly short to me, but.
Thank you, Councillor Lindgren. Councillor Flynn.
Yeah, your question created my question, but related to the mayor's question about if we don't support this or don't do this, you could possibly do it. So I guess my question would be, if we didn't support it and then you decide to do it, do we then cost share or do you pay all of it? And then that would lead me to say, why wouldn't you pay more of it and let us spend our money on the signage and all that? Because if you're going to do it anyway, as much as you don't like to do that, and you may not, but if that's an option in your pocket, then why do we cost share if it's the Trans-Canada Highway improvements and you're going to do them anyway? I'm not in that position personally, but it leads, the answer to the question led me to, maybe you should be paying for pretty much everything, and we deal with signage and the add-ons, because if we say no, you're going to do it anyhow.
Just a comment on budgeting,
Your Worship.
Director of Engineering.
Your Worship, the partnership is about us having a say in what's going on in this intersection.
Okay.
And that's where the partnership comes from. Essentially, of course, we want to work with the ministry because they are the experts on the Trans-Canada Highway. We are the experts on our downtown and our flow through the corridor. So that's where the partnership comes from. I don't think we want to turn this into an adversarial debate or discussion, but the whole idea is that we have some say in this, and the fact is that the city and ICBC are the authors of that report, the safety corridor report. Therefore, we have a document on our shelf that says that currently the structure of the Trans-Canada Highway is not safe, and we have recommendations from that report indicating how to improve the safety, and that's why we're here today. So as far as the ministry moving forward and doing that, as Steve had mentioned earlier, it's about cooperation. And I think that it's wise for the city to cooperate with the ministry and vice versa. As far as the budget goes, we do have our portion and our share, which is substantially less than the actual costs. The ministry is funding the majority of the cost for these improvements, and has come up to the plate for phase 2, because initially we were only dealing with phase 1 of this. Phase 2 is 220,000 plus, and we're only being asked to contribute a minor amount, and that was recommended by our CAO.
Oh, and just to be clear, I agree, I don't want it adversarial, but the answer to the question was, if we don't support it, they'll do it, then do we then not spend any money? I agree, working in partnership is better. It was an interesting answer because I didn't expect it until the mayor asked the question, so.
And that's why I caveat with potentially. So when I said I have an obligation to fix safety issues that are identified and identified for us, and if we continue to see it, I also have to have the means to be able to do it. And when I say means, I mean funding. Yeah. So that funding through partnership is a lot easier to secure that way. I don't necessarily have enough funding to complete it on our own. So that's why potentially is the issue. And it's funding aside, it's a lot more challenging as well to get that funding when the community doesn't support your improvements.
The other question was that the mayor asked, and I didn't really understand if you were willing to put something in writing about entrance signs and speed reader, that you would be in support once we figure out what we want.
Yeah.
Will you put that in writing?
Yeah, I could send a letter to yourself for it.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mayor. Those were good questions that I hadn't thought of, so.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there any other questions we have before comments or motion? Steve, thank you very much, and thanks
for
for
having
taking
us. Yeah.
our difficult questions. We
That's what I'm
really
here for.
appreciate
That's what
that.
I'm here for, yeah.
Councillor Lindgren, did you have another question?
I do have one question about the intersection shown on here where you come down, I think it's Okanagan, to the Cenotaph stop, yeah, where you got your hand there. So currently there's a stop sign there and the people coming from 3rd Street have the throughway. Will that change if we're expecting this to be a major route, or are we going to keep it the way it is?
Director of Engineering and Public Works?
Your worship, we'll keep it as it is until the traffic flows increase and become a problem, and then we will relook at this entire intersection. There has been some debate whether that this needs to be a large roundabout at some point, which could potentially happen in the future. The problem we have with this is that we have businesses on this section of the street, and they have access egress into that. So that's the issue that we're trying to deal with right now. Just to add to that, the intersection at 2nd, this is another intersection that we may have some problems with on our side, and that one will turn into a 4-way stop. And at some point in the future, again, as traffic flows increase, this will have the flow through. So the stops will be at 2nd on either side. But right now it'll be a 4-way stop.
Thank you. Any other questions, Councillor Lindgren? Okay. Is there any other questions from council? Question, Councillor Lavery?
Yes, thanks, Mayor Harrison. Thank you, Mayor Harrison. Essentially, it's a procedural question here. So this item is here for our information at this stage. Will this come back to council for direction, or do we give direction here at this meeting today? Through you, Your Worship.
Thank you for the question. I'll ask the CAO the procedure he'd like to follow.
Your Worship, we would be looking for a motion here today, and I'll put that up on the screen in a moment, but it will also come back to council at the next council meeting.
So the motion, regardless of whether it passes or fails, would go forward to council?
Yes, it will be on a council agenda.
Okay. Councillor Lavery, did you want to follow up?
No, but I do have some comments, so when we're at the...
Okay.
Are we at the
How about
comments?
if we ask for the motion, and then we'll...
Without a doubt.
And we'll leave your microphone on. So this is a proposed motion. I'll just let council read it. Is there someone who would like to move the motion? Councillor Wallace-Richmond, second Councillor Lavery. We'll open it up for discussion. Councillor Lavery, thank you for being patient.
Thank you, Mayor Harrison, and thanks to staff for their ongoing and continual work on this. I appreciate it for bringing the real conundrums back to our table. And just for the record, I have promised myself not to be a micromanager traffic engineer, not referencing Councillor Wallace-Richmond, but just for myself. I'm going to support this motion for a number of reasons. The context, and we've seen this before, and it happened before my time on council, is we've got two separate road systems. They have mutually exclusive needs, and in fact, so mutually exclusive that improvement in one denigrates or counteracts the needs of the other. And on top of that, there's no room at all to make any effective changes, design changes. And this is what previous councils have been dealing with. We looked at it last council, and I think it's good that we're back here now to make a decision. While I have opinions on the larger scale of traffic engineering and the flow and stuff like that, I really do default to the more granular technical expertise that we're given in front of us. And I'm glad that this is not a phase. This is coming back not as a phased project, but as that complete unit. I think that's a big thing. The conundrum of Alexander and Ross Street remains, and I think that the expert opinions about what should happen are in front of us here, and I accept them. I do think that the crossing over at McLeod Street and at 6th is archaic, and maybe I'm getting granular here now in terms of being a traffic engineer, but I think that they are well beyond their prime and need to be restricted as this plan indicates. And the improvements at 4th, I mean, we have had, in my time here, pedestrian fatalities there with it as well. So I would like to see further monitoring of the red light camera thing, but I think that the plan as presented I would support. I would also note that as we're talking about mitigating driver speed, and this, I mean, this is the big thing that we're talking about here right now. And I've mentioned this before, but 2 years ago in Europe, where they have interval speed cameras with big signs saying, smile, you're on interval speed camera, coming down Tank Hill. If there's ever an opportunity to get a pilot project through the province here, I'd be really interested in staff sort of A, monitoring that, and B, proposing that to us. I know they're talking about doing that on the Malahat, and maybe it's even underway about that, but I think that that's another way that's not as invasive to the road situation as rumble strips and things like that, but people know coming down Tank Hill between A and B and C, you're being monitored, and it works. So I will support the motion at hand for those reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lavery. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Worship. And I will also start by saying I'm not a traffic or safety engineer, and I rely on our staff, on the ministry, and the people who do this for a living for their recommendations. And I do appreciate all the efforts of staff and all the efforts of ministry and everybody else that's been involved in this. My number one premise is safety on the Trans-Canada. And I don't think anybody could argue that the way we've got it set up with two lights so close to each other is safe. I personally spend a lot of time on our road network and cross that highway, as I said, 6 to 8 times a day. And I personally, Lachlan, you can't write this down, have looked at the light at by the fire hall, Ross, and drove through a red light at Alexander. I've done that myself. I've seen many people do that. They're too close together. And anybody that argues that is kidding themselves, because that's simple, it's easy, it's an easy fix. That being said, I also think 4th is our most dangerous intersection. And I come down Okanagan every day and would turn at 4th and go across the highway if there was a light there and take a lot of pressure off of Alexander. So those two improvements to me, moving the light from Ross to 4th and putting signalized turns at 4th, to me, even not being a traffic and safety engineer, are obvious enhancements. So I think safety on the Trans-Canada Highway will improve significantly with that one change. I also think that having 2 left turns on and off the highway and in and out of downtown, advance left signals, will improve access to downtown, not make it worse. And I think that closing a couple of the very dangerous accesses for across the Trans-Canada will make people more comfortable and encourage them to come downtown, because I know people that don't come downtown because of the safety issues. So my number one concern is safety on the Trans-Canada, and I think this is a significant improvement. I think overall, having taken advantage of the little bit of left turn signal we have at Shuswap, but fully advanced signaling that will significantly improve that intersection, and it will significantly improve access at 4th to our downtown. And if you could go back to the map, please, that just has the proposed, the final plan. Because I think one thing nobody's talked about, can we get back to that map? Appendix C. One thing that people haven't talked about, and again, I come down Okanagan every day and go past the playground and use Alexander. I think Alexander traffic will become less, and I also think that traffic by our playground on both sides of that playground will become less with these changes. So by making these changes, I think we're improving safety around one of our most used playgrounds as well. So right now we have 0 left turn access in and out of our downtown. We're going to have 2. I think that improves access to the downtown. I think spacing those lights makes sense. The advance indicator is going to be in a better place for the lights at 4th. And again, I'm saying all this and I'm not a traffic engineer, but to me, it just makes common sense. So I will vote in support of this and agree with Councillor Lavery's comments that I'm glad we're not doing it in phases. And I really appreciate the ministry coming forward with some more money to make it all happen at once. So I am going to vote in favor.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Councillor Wallace-Richmond.
Thanks, Your Worship. I too will be voting in favor. There are really 2 parallel conversations happening. One is about safety, one is about access. I will never vote to mitigate safety at the expense of access. So as a result, and because I know and I trust the advice of our trained professionals, I am in full support of this process and project.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace-Richmond. Councillor Lindgren.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm also in support of this motion. I just want to comment that in the summer I spent a significant amount of time in Ladysmith on Vancouver Island, and they mitigated this problem by completely closing off access from their downtown area on most of their streets. So you just have a dead-end street, which makes it very frustrating if you're new in town. You just can't get around because you turn down these streets and then you have to turn around and go back up again to find the next access and try again. They're not well marked. So I'm glad that we're going with this right turn only restriction instead of completely closing off access. I think that makes sense. I think time will tell whether or not moving the lights further apart will have any improvement on the number of accidents that happen at Alexander Street, which I think is where the significant number of our accidents have happened in the past. I hope it does. I know a number of people that have been nearly hit by cars as pedestrians there. We know that we've had at least 1 fatality there, and fatalities at 50 kilometers an hour should be unheard of. So I think speed is still going to be an issue, and I think it's going to be something we need to deal with. I'd love to see more motion forward on the red light camera, but for now this is a significant improvement.
Thank you, Councillor Lindgren. Any other councillor speakers? Okay. I'd like to propose an amendment to the motion. Could we have the motion on the screen? Great, thank you. I actually have 2 amendments, but I'll make them one at a time. The first amendment I would like to make is, and that Minister of Transportation Infrastructure provides written agreement that an overhead gate signs on the west and east sides of Salmon Arm and speed reader boards be permitted on the highway. Would there be someone I'd like to second that motion? Councillor Cannon, thank you. Discussion on the motion. I will speak to it briefly. I think we heard from Steve saying that there's certainly an agreement to writing that letter. I think that this piece is a big part of this motion. Because I agree with everything that I've heard about safety on the highway corridor. And this will add to the safety on the highway corridor because it will slow people down. I of course, am concerned about safety, but I am also concerned about the well-being of our downtown. And if people are going too fast to turn in there, it's going to affect the downtown. So if this amendment passes, I will certainly work with staff to look for reserve funds where we can finance these 2 pieces, because I want them to happen as quickly as any changes to the highway. So I'll entertain a discussion on the amendment. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Worship. Just so I'm clear, looking at the motion as it stands, your piece would be a second and that?
Yes.
Okay, I'm very much in support of it. I was going to ask whether we should be putting another motion forward or an amendment, so thank you.
Okay. Other comments on the amendment? Seeing none, all in favor of the amendment? Okay, that passes unanimously. A second amendment I would like to make would be, and that the Ministry of Transportation Infrastructure and the City of Salmon Arm agree on installing a intersection safety camera at Alexander and Trans-Canada Highway at the same time as this highway project takes place. Councillor Cannon, second. Thank you. I hear what Steve says, and I understand it. Council, this is our chance to get an intersection camera there. And I've been working on this for a long time. I think if we don't include an intersection camera with this project, then there won't be one put there. So that's why I'm putting it forward. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Worship. And I do have to ask, if we add this and support it, but the ministry doesn't at this time, does that mean nothing happens? Because I'm not in support of it if we add it in that vein. And I do somewhat agree with the ministry that moving that problem light that's too close to Alexander might alleviate the need for the red light camera, and it might be the wrong intersection for the red light camera. So I agree that this may be our only chance to get the red light camera, but I think the wording should be more along the lines that once the results of these changes are reviewed, that the ministry still is open to discussing a red light camera, which I believe I heard from them. But I don't want to see all of these positive changes not occur because of the red light camera issue. So would your motion be reading that if we don't get that, we don't do this?
Yeah, so thank you for the clarification. That's what my amendment would say. So if this amendment doesn't pass, you might want to make a second amendment that's more in your wording. But my amendment is that this would be a part of this project, and without this piece, the project wouldn't go forward.
Okay, well, I'll wait to hear from others, but I don't want this project to live or die by a red light camera, which I question the value of personally, but.
Oh, thank you very much, fair enough. Councillor Wallace-Richmond.
Thanks, Your Worship. I can't support your amendment, Mr. Mayor. We, at this table, always talk about how other levels of government are putting conditions on us that can be challenging to meet. I think Modi and ICBC and staff have worked in good faith to deliver a solution that meets what they perceive to be the issue at hand, and I won't make it conditional on a red light camera, even if I understand that you've worked hard and have been diligent and meaningful in your efforts to get one. It's not to say we won't get one, but I can't support making it a condition of.
Appreciate your comments. Thank you very much. Councillor Cannon.
Well, this is a hard one because I've been at the table as you, when you went over the history of it in 2010 when, we were like, yay, we're getting it. And I think with changing those intersections in this project, the time is, I guess, to do the camera at that time when we do it, when we change the intersections. But do I want the project not to go ahead because of this request? I guess in the history of the red light camera, I almost feel like we have to take a hard position on it, because if you look at the correspondence that went back and forth, I think with us changing those intersections that the red light camera will be more effective, and we should do it when we do the project because it's all about safety. And I think if we attach it to this, I think the ministry will know that we're quite serious about safety in our highway corridor. So I will support it.
Thank you, Councillor Cannon. Councillor Lindgren.
Thank you, Mayor. I also would support this amendment for all the reasons that Councillor Cannon just mentioned. I just want to draw our attention to the fact that the confusion between the two lights only affects traffic traveling east, obviously, because when you're coming the other way at that intersection, you don't see the light that's behind you. So I know that we've had a number of collisions at that intersection where people have been rear-ended traveling west. So it has nothing to do with where the light is at whatever the Hudson, not whatever this other cross street, Ross Street, I guess, when you're traveling west. Whether or not that has any indication when you're traveling east, Moti says it does, and so I have no reason not to believe them, but I know that there are accidents happening going the other direction that are completely unrelated to that. And I think Councillor Cannon's right. If we don't insist that it gets done, we'll still be sitting here at the end of our 4-year term with no answers for the public who've been concerned about this for a very long time. It was a huge issue when during our campaign, and a lot of people came to talk to me about it. And I'm fully in support of making people accountable, particularly the semi-trucks that go roaring through there. And I think that we need to do something about slowing them down. And if we can't put something on the ground like rumble strips, because that's a maintenance issue, then we need to do something else. And we know that this works.
Thank you, Councillor Lindgren. Councillor Lavery.
Yes, thanks, Mayor Harrison. Just as a quick refresh, what was the previous proposal about cost sharing the red light camera, and how much was it? Through you, Your Worship.
The city would finance a red light camera.
To the amount of?
It was about 100,000 at that time.
So at this stage, I understand the certainly the rationale on both sides here. I do not want. I will vote against the amendment. I do not want to not negate it going forward, but delay it going forward. And I think that this may do that. I think at a time, if we were going to be 100% in on the cost of it at the time, and perhaps going forward, we still have the option to do that. And I think, in my view, let's see what happens. Ask staff and Moti for a review within a year. And if that's the case, move forward with it. But I do not want to make this contingent on the implication of this amendment.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Councillor Flynn.
I did have a question to everybody here. If we feel a red light camera improves safety, and I kind of heard from the experts that it doesn't necessarily do so, might cause more accidents because people stop when they normally wouldn't, and cause rear enders. But if we feel strongly that a red light safety camera improves safety, how do we know which of the 3 lights it's needed at the most? Will it be the new light at 4th because of people coming down the hill? Will it be Shuswap to deal with pedestrians and all of those issues, or is it Alexander? I struggle with holding up a project that improves safety, and we're going to decide which light needs a red light camera. I think we're better off waiting for a year and perhaps having an amendment that makes sure that the ministry is on side with watching for a year and determining if a red light camera is placed, which intersection it should be placed at. So again, I just want everybody to think about that. Do we know that it's going to solve anything at the middle light of the 3? So, or do we want 3 red light cameras? But I will still vote against the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Any other discussion on the amendment? Okay, I'll call a question. All in favor of the amendment? Opposed? The amendment fails. Tied 3-3, right? Okay. Thank you for your good discussion on that topic, by the way. Councillor Flynn.
I would like to have an end that similar to the one that's there, that does say that after a year of seeing how these improvements go, assuming they get voted to move forward, that the ministry and staff sit down and review whether a red light camera at one of the intersections would further improve safety.
With the seconder of that amendment, Councillor Lavery, thank you. Discussion on the amendment.
I think my discussion against the other amendment made it clear where I stand on this one.
Fair enough, thank you. Other discussion on the amendment? All those in favor of the amendment, That passes unanimously. Thank you. Any discussion on the motion as amended? Okay, just before calling the question then, thank you very much, Council, for your discussion on the item, and thank you to the people from ministry. Really appreciate you being here, and on staff and director, and a lot of work's been done on this. And although I didn't get everything that I wanted here, I will support the motion because I think it's important that we move together. So I will support the motion as amended. All those in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you. We will move forward. We have one other item. It's just an informational item. Oh, two, sorry. Under 6.1 Agricultural Land Commission, letter dated January the 8th, 2019, that was application 57674 to conduct a non-farm use in the agricultural land reserve. You might recall that's located up in North Broadview. It's the old North Broadview School, and there was an application from a church to build a church there. As you can see, the ALC has turned that request down. Is there any comments or questions about that? Okay. 6.2, I would suggest that we save this item at least till, let's see, perhaps the next planning meeting. I'm not sure how council feels about Director of Engineering and Public Works. How long is that presentation about?
Your Worship. Sorry, Your Worship, probably about 15-20 minutes and then discussion. So you're looking at least half an hour.
So yeah, and we don't want to short that. Council, do you want to provide any direction? How are you feeling about it?
2 weeks.
How about if we delay it till the planning meeting in 2 weeks?
Because we don't even have quorum at that
No
meeting,
problem.
I think.
Okay, so Director, you're
Absolutely.
okay with that?
No
Okay,
problem.
that's what we'll do. Council, any objection to that?
That's the meeting that you're away, I'm away, Counselor Cannon's away. I don't even know if we have quorum at that meeting.
CEO, the planning meeting in 2 weeks. I expect we'll have 4 members of council there, right?
As far as I know at this point, Your Worship.
And, you know, I never like to plan around, you know, our schedule. So that presentation could be emailed to us as well, right, in advance?
Yes, Your Worship, I can send it out, and if there's questions from the council members who aren't in attendance, they can definitely touch base with me, and I can answer anything. Or there's another option. I mean, the way the snow has been right now, we haven't got much. This could even be delayed even a little longer, if council wishes.
Okay, so let's tentatively plan it for the planning meeting, and then we can always make that decision prior to that if we feel that perhaps it would be better in the fall. Councillor Lavery?
Yes, thanks, Mayor Harrison. I know you've sort of given direction here. I'm wondering if I'm anticipating, I think, that next council session in the evening, we may not have a lot of public hearing, if any. Maybe that's an opportune time to do it too. I don't want to muddy the waters, but I think that we should move this along ASAP. And I prefer that we have as full council table as possible here.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, we will look at that agenda, and if we can fit it into the council meeting next Monday, that would be a possibility too, and that may be a real possibility. So what we'll decide today is we won't do it today, but we will delay. Okay, thank you very much. A motion to adjourn this planning meeting.
Moved by Councillor Cannon, seconded by Councillor Wallace Richmond, that the Development and Planning Services Committee meeting of January 21st, 2019 be adjourned.
All those in favor? Council, before we leave, at 10 o'clock, we have a special council meeting, which is 2 minutes from now. So, can we start early, or do we have to wait for 10?
We have to wait, Your Worship.
All right, we'll wait 2 minutes.